This is Gemara Messiah Daf Beis B'siyata D'Shemaya. We embark on another incredible Masechta in Mirza Hashem. Today's year, the first year of Metziah, an incredible start. It's been sponsored as a Schos Refuah Shlema from Moshe Yisrael Ben Liba B'siyata D'Shemaya. All the Schos HaTorah of New Haskalah, the vigor, the excitement should bring an incredible Refuah Shlema to Moshe Yisrael ben Liba. And as we mentioned at the end of Baba Kama, at some level, it's not really a fresh start. Because at some level, Baba Metziah is a continuation of Baba Kama, which is indeed one of the reasons why I think it's the Maharsha speaks out at the end of Baba Kama. The ending was unique. Usually we end the Masechta on a high note. Okay, some point out the last Rashi adds in that word toiv, Mare toiv, good pasture. But in reality, it didn't have that same, Kishmaka Kinaka ending like usual. So some say, you know why? Because we're not done. Because we're in the middle. We're 1/3 done. But at least let's take the chizik of the excitement of a new Masechta to allow us to have more passion, to understand, to conquer, to chazer, etc. And with that, we begin the first Mishnah, a famous Mishnah, Shnayim oichzin betalis. Or as Rav Asher Eli would say, Shnayim oichazin betalis. Two people walking to Bezdin, holding the talis, and particularly that they're holding the talis, the top Rashi points out, they're holding the garment because the fact that they're holding it creates a situation that it's at some level within your possession. So Reuven and Shimon walking to Bezdin holding a garment together. And this one says, Ani mitzasiyah, I found this garment. Ani mitzasiyah. This one says, I found the garment. Kulashli, this one says, the entire item is mine. Kulashli. And this one says, the entire item is mine. So why the interesting double language? The Gemara will discuss in a moment. But what's the din if two people walk into Bezdin holding an item, each one claiming it's theirs? Each one has to swear that they have no less than half, and then v'yachloiku, we have the classical yachloiku, they split the talis. So they each one claim whole, they each one make a shavua, they each one swear, and they each get half. Case A in the Mishnah. Case B, Zamer kula shli v'zamer chatzia shli. What if the first guy says, yeah, it's all mine, but the other guy says, no, I agree that half is yours, but the other half is mine. So what's the halachas? This is really verbatim the first case, just played out into the second case. Hi, Merkulishli, so always the same thing as the first case, and therefore, he swears there is no less than 3/4. Why 3/4? Because again, on one half of this talis, they all agree it belongs to Reuven. So Reuven takes that half right away. It's on the other half of the talis that they are fighting over. So on that second half of the talis, they each make a shvuah that they get half. And therefore, Reuven makes a shvuah, he gets none less than 3/4, the half, which he gets automatically, plus a half of the second half, a quarter, which is 3/4. And Shimon, who says, half is mine, he makes a shvuah, he doesn't get less than a quarter, and then Case number 2 in the Mishnah. Continues the Mishnah, case number 3. Two people walk into Bezdin, riding on an animal. One is riding, and one is leading the animal. One is holding the reins and leading it into Bezdin. They each claim the entire animal is theirs. Same exact halacha. They each swear they don't have less than half, and they split the animal. And the Mishnah concludes with a little bit of a interesting line. When they admit, or there are witnesses, then there is no need for a shvu. And Rashi already jumps right in and teaches us that this is going to be teaching us a chiddush and Daf Ches, that you can pick up an item for your friend. We'll get there b'siyata d'shmaya. So one overarching din in the Mishnah, which is that when two people walk into Bezdin claiming that they found an item and each one claims full ownership, there has to be a shvuah, and then they split it. So before we get involved in the actual din in the Mishnah, we have to understand the wording of the Mishnah, which often is the way the Gemara begins. So begins the Gemara, Lama li lemisni, what is the reason why the Mishnah taught, Ze'oimer ani mitzasiyah, the Gemara asking on the Lashon HaMishnah. Why does it say, this one says I found it, this one says I found it, Zamar Kulashli. What's the question? Listni Chada. The Mishnah should have just said one case. Why did the Mishnah say back and forth, I found it, all mine? Just say one case. Answers the Gemara, it did. Chada Katani. That even though the words of the Mishnah one might think that no, the Mishnah is referring to two different cases, says the Gemara, it's really all one large case. What is the case? The case is that each one says, I found it, and all is mine. Ask the Gemara if that's true. The Mishnah should have just said that each one says, I found it. And know what I'll know, the kula shali. If you say, I found it, and this one says, I found it, what does that mean? They're each claiming ownership over the item. So they each clearly are saying, I found it, and it's all mine. Why does the Mishnah have to speak that out? Explains the Gemara, if it would have said that, I would have thought my mitzasiyah, re'isiyah. I would have thought, you know what it meant? By I found it, I saw the item, not that I picked it up. And it never came to his hand. But with mere sight, you can make a kinyan. As people talk, they say, I found it. You didn't pick it up yet. What do you mean? It's over there. So that's the chiddush. That you would have thought if it just said ani mitzasiyah, I found it. You would have thought that what they each are saying is they saw it, and even before they got to their hand, so therefore, Tana Kula Shali, the Mishnah said, no, I found it, and it's all mine. To hone in on the fact, Beria Kani, that there is no kinyan with mere sight, and rather they actually picked it up. And that's why the Mishnah had to say, Zamar Mitzasiyah, Vikula Shali, Zamar Mitzasiyah. Amrit, ask the Gemara, really? Is there a Hava Amina that my mitzasiyah, re'isiyah, is that a real Hava Amina? You just told me that we have to come to explain that it's not that found it means seeing it. But how can you think that? V'amar Rav Noi, but Rav Noi has taught us, we're about 15 lines from the bottom. The first one line is Rav Noi. Taught us Rav Noi umatzasa. When the pasuk says that you found an item, the pasuk discussing the obligation to return a found item. And the pasuk there says, Tasali ade mashma. It's only once it comes to your hand. But if it never came to your hand, it's not called you found it. Now this is really in particular referring to the Metziah of a guy. Because of course the Metziah of a yid, there's another din that even once you see it, you're not allowed to be visalamta. You're not allowed to hide your eyes from it. But over here we're talking about the Metziah of a guy, that even if it umatzasa means it came to your hand, and it's teaching an extra chiddush that by a guy, even after one picked it up, there's no obligation to return it. Again, barring the fact if it would create a chilul Hashem, a kiddush Hashem, etc. But ask the Gemara that Rav Noi has taught us that the word umatzasa means it came to your hand. So why would you have a havamina that it meant just seeing it? Answers the Gemara in, you're right. Umatzasa dekra das liyadei mashma. When the Torah says umatzasa means came to your hand. Umiu tana lishta da'alma nakat. Still, there would have been a havamina, there would have been a thought that the Tana of the Mishnah is talking in the way that people talk. And when people see something, Amar, Ana Ashkachis, they say, I found it. And even though that's what one would have thought. Tana Kula Shli. So the Mishnah had to say the words Kula Shli, Debriya Ba'alma, Loi, Kani, Love. that they were not koinin. Now, before we continue, just one important Rashi. Rashi says, one second. No, let's continue before we go to Rashi. Excuse me. Says the Gemara. So what should the Mishnah have said? V'lisna kula shali. So you're telling me that the whole reason is to teach me that you can't be kind of by seeing it. Ask the Gemara. The Mishnah should have just said kula shali. It's all mine. And the Mishnah would never have had to say that I found it. And by saying kula shali, that clearly means what? That it came to your hand and it's all yours. So why do you have to write both cases in the Mishnah? Explains the Gemara, Itani kula shali. You know what I would have thought? Hava amina ba'alma dekatani Metziah. I would have thought everywhere else in Shas where the word Metziah is used, Bariya ba'alma kani. I would have thought that there's a kinyan with mere sight. Tana ana Metziah. So our Mishnah went and said, Ani Metziah, said I found it. And then said what? And then said it's all mine. Timei Mishnah Yisei Rashma. Even for the extra words we learn, Teriya Loi Kani. And that is the Chiddush of our Mishnah, that these extra words teach us that Re'iyah cannot make a kinyan. And that really concludes option A of the Gemara. That what does the Mishnah mean? Zamar ani mitzasiyah, zamar ani mitzasiyah, zamar kulishli, zamar kulishli. To teach us a chiddush that with Re'iyah you are not koinam. Ask the Gemara, very nice pshat, but we have a technical problem. Omi matzis amr, 3 lines on the Y lines, chadam, katani. Do you really think you could say that the Mishnah is all one case? The word zeh clearly implies a different person talking. So the fact that the Mishnah says zeh clearly implies that it's not one case. So how can you tell me that the entire Mishnah is one case? So says the Gemara, Amar Rapapa Vitema Rav Simi Barashi V'Amr Lakadi, a new teretz. So whole first Amr we were assuming that the first part of the Mishnah is one case. That Reuven says I found it and it's all mine, and Shimon says the same. After figuring out why the Mishnah would say that, which would be to come along and teach us that you cannot have a kinyan by mere sight, and rather you actually have to pick it up. Now comes along the Gemara. And Rapapa, Vitem, Rav Simi Barashi, and some say in the name of Kati, that's someone's name, says a new pshat in the Mishnah. On the last line of Amud Aleph, Reisha b'Metziah, V'Seifa b'Mekach u'Memkar. 2 different cases. The Reisha, the first case of the Mishnah is they walk into Bezdin holding an item, each one claiming, Zeh Omer Ani Mitzasiyah, each one claiming, I found the item. And then the second case of the Mishnah is that they walk into Bezdin and each one claim Kula Shali, meaning I purchased the item. That Reuven and Shimon walk into Bezdin holding an item that used to belong to Levi, and they each say we bought it from Levi. Now everyone's wondering, why don't we just ask Levi? Why don't we just see who paid money? Okay, the Gemara is going to get there, but that's the second case of the Mishnah, and explains the Gemara why do we need 2 different cases. Usricha. And both cases are necessary as we turn over to Beis Amid Beis. Explains the Gemara. If we just said the first case of the Mishnah, which is Metziah, which is the case in which the items are found, that's where there is a case of a shvua. Why? Because one classically is Moira Heter, as the top Rashi says. One says, it's not such a big deal what I'm doing. And he says, Chavrai, my friend, he's not losing anything. Meaning, maybe in actuality, Reuven found the item first. Shimon sees Reuven picking up this fancy garment, so Shimon grabs hold of it. Now when they come to Bezdin, Shimon says, I found it and it's all mine. Shimon, what do you mean Reuven found it? No, Shimon's Meira Heter. Shimon tells himself it's not such a big deal. You know why? Because Reuven's not really losing anything, because Because it's a found item. He didn't pay anything for this item. And therefore, Shimon tells himself, in his mind, he speaks and he says, Ezel itvis is probably hey, I'll go grab it and I'll split it with him. That's only in the case of Metziah. Avol mekach umemkar delekar lemimar hachi. In the case of mekach umemkar, where there is no such a Meir heter. Why? Because the other guy paid for the item. So you see Reuven paying for the item, you're going to throw money down on the table and grab the item. How do you say that? Because he is losing his item. And therefore, you would not think there is a shvuah. So says the Gemara, okay, what about the flip? 5 lines down, Bezim and Bez. If you would have only said the case of buying and selling, I would have thought, Havamina they had in Hasamu Darami Rabbanan Shvuah Alei. That's where there is a shvuah. Why? Misham the Meir V'Amar. Because he tells himself and he says, Chavrai to make a yahiv, V'anah to make a yahiv. This is a different Meir heter. He says, listen, it's true Reuven maybe bought the item first, but guess what? Reuven put money on the table and I put money on the table. V'anah to make a yavinah. Hashna the tzricha ladidi. Now that I want the item, Ashkele Anah, I'll take the item. And my friend will go and he'll get, he'll be matriach, and he'll go and he'll buy a different item. He'll get the money back. You can't say, oh, he'll go find another item. That's ridiculous. Maybe in that case, there would be no shvuah. Sricha, that's why we need both cases in the Mishnah. So the Gemara explains very simply that really there's 2 cases going on in the Mishnah. There's the case of Metziah and there's the case of Mekach Umemkar, and each is teaching a chiddush. Metziah, the chiddush is that there's a Meir heter. One could tell himself and convince himself it's not such a big deal because his friend is not losing anything. It's a found item. By Mekach Umemkar, one could tell himself it's not such a big deal because his friends could just go buy another item. And that's the reason why we had to say both cases and that there's a shvuah by both. Continues the Gemara 10 lines down. The first one in line is Eimalai Mekach Umekgar Velechse Zuzi Mimanaka. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. What's the whole fight about buying and selling? Just go see who the seller took money from. Explains the Gemara, like Tzricha Denaka Miter Vayu. The Chiddush is that the seller took money from both. Michad Midaitei Umichad Bal Karchei. One he wanted to take from and one he was forced to take from. We don't know which one he wanted to take from, which one he was forced to take the money from, and that's the reason why in such a situation we create a shvuah. And that wraps up really part A, which is what? What is the first 2 cases of the Mishnah? And the Gemara concludes it's a case of Mekach Umemkar and a case of Metziah, each teaching its own chiddush. And the reason why Mekach Umemkar you can't just see who take the money is because they both gave money. Continues the Gemara 13 lines down. The first one line is who? Leima mas nisan deloi keben nanis. Let us suggest that our Mishnah is not like Ben Nanis. Why? The Ben Nanis, because if it was Ben Nanis, Amar, he holds case says Ben Nanis. In any scenario which it could potentially come to a shvuah shav, to a false shvuah, then we don't allow them to swear. So says the Gemara, in our case, seemingly, if each one makes a shvuah, then it's a coming to a shvuah shav. So seemingly our Mishnah is not like Ben Nanis. Explains the Gemara, no, I feel the tema Ben Nanis, our Mishnah can fit with Ben Nanis. Some in the case of Ben Nanis. What's the case of Ben Nanis? It's the case of Shvuah, it's the case of Chenvini al bin Kasai. We'll see in a moment what's going on over there. Some in the case of Ben Nanis. Vadai ika Shvuah shav, someone is certainly lying falsely. But in our case, it could be no one's lying falsely. Why not? How could there be no shvuah shav if they're both swearing to the fact that the Metziah is theirs? Because maybe in actuality, you know what really happened in our Mishnah? They picked it up simultaneously. And therefore, when each one swears that he doesn't have less than half, it's a perfectly emistika shvuah. It's absolutely true. Because in reality, they picked it up together. Whereas in Ben Nanis' case, that is not true. For a quick moment, let's look at Rashi. Rashi at the end of the narrow lines says, what is the case of Ben Nanis? Amar Balabais Lechenvini. Here's the case. 10 libni chite b'dinar. The Balabais says to the storekeeper, give my son wheat worth a dinar of alay l'shalim, and I'll pay for it. Or he tells the store owner, please give my workers wheat b'sela mois. Shani chayiv v'scharam. I owe my workers money. I don't have the cash. So I tell them, go shop at the local grocery store, and I'll reimburse the store. V'alay litin sell, and I'll give back to the store owner. Hu amar nesatu. And now there's a fight. Did he pay back or not? And they're both Tevea from the Balabais. The store owner says he gave to the workers, and the workers come to the Balabais and said they didn't get anything, they want to get back. They both swear and they get from the Balabais. He has to pay back to the store owner that he paid the workers, and he has to pay the workers. And on this, Amar ben Anis, how can you bring out a shua shav? Because someone for sure is lying. Do they take it or not? Says the Gemara, but our Mishnah is not necessarily that way, because our Mishnah is a Metziah, and therefore it could be they picked it all up at the same time. Continues the Gemara about 20 lines to the bottom. The first one line is like Bua Lema Mas Nisan Teloi Kisumchas. So we try to suggest the Mishnah is not like Benanis. We concluded it could fit with Benanis. Now says the Gemara, let's say the Mishnah is not like Sumchas. Why? Tiki Sumchas, if it's going with Sumchas, Amar. Sumchas Od Mama Mutabasave Chalkin. Anytime we have money that is sitting in doubt, where a Chalkin we split it below Shvua. You split it without a Shvua. And therefore, says the Gemara, in the fact that our Mishnah, we have money lying in a doubt, they're both arguing over who owns this garment, and the Mishnah said there's a shvua. That seems to say, not like Ben Anis, not like Sumchas, excuse me. Just to point out, Rashi in the third line says, Sumchas is in case of Baba Kama that we had recently, Sharsha Nagis Chabar V'nim Sa'obra B'tzida, an ox gores a cow, and we find a fetus on the side, and we're not sure, did the ox cause the miscarriage? Or did the miscarriage happen prior? And therefore, we're not sure, does the owner of the ox have to pay for just the cow or also the cow and the fetus sitting next to it? So, Yamam and Amuta B'Safik. In that case, we're not sure what the story is. Simcha says, we split it without a shvuah. So says the Gemara, our Mishnah is seemingly not like Simchas. Responds the Gemara of Elamai. So what else are you going to tell me? Rabbanon. You want to suggest that our Mishnah is like the Rabbanon? Ha'amri, what do the Rabbanon say? The Rabbanan say, so bring a proof that it's yours. Our Mishnah doesn't say that either. Our Mishnah says they both swear and take. So our Mishnah is fitting with no one. Responds the Gemara, hi, my, what are you talking about? If you're going to tell me the Mishnah is a Rabbanan, in the case in Baba Kama where they're not both grabbing the item, that's where That's where the Rabbanan say, that's where the Rabbanan say, whereas Hacha, in our case, the Tervayu Tafsi, where they're both grabbing and holding the item, Palgi la bishvua. They split it with a shvua. So says the Gemara, the difference is, in the case in Baba Kama, no one's holding the item. There's a fetus on the floor. They're arguing about cash. That's what the Rabbanan say. There's no mochzik. You have to, I shouldn't say the words muchzik. There's no one holding the item. Whereas in our case, where they both walk into Bez and holding it, which actually is a muchzik, then tafsi la bishvua. Responds back, 1 second. Ali Amrit Somches. If you're going to tell me that a Mishnah is Somches, Hashta, so that's why the Mishnah can, yes, fit with the Rabbanah. But you want to say it's Somches, Hashta, Mal, over there, they're not both grabbing it. And what does Somches hold Chalke below Shvua? You don't need to swear. Hacha de Tervayu Tafsila, like Kol Shekain. Says the Gemara, it should be even better according to Sumches. If Sumches holds when the money's lying on the floor, the halacha is split it without a shvua. So certainly if they're both walking to Bezdin, holding an item, the din should be the same. Responds the Gemara, afilu tema Sumches. You're right. The Mishnah, meaning, and that's the reason why the Mishnah is not according to Sumches, because according to Sumches, there should be no reason for a Shvuah. Responds the Gemara, no, afilu tema Sumches, we could reconcile Sumches with our Mishnah. Ki Amar Sumchas, when did Sumchas say his din Shema v'Shema? Sumchas only said his din when they both do not know. No one knows when the cow gave birth. We show up, and we have a dead cow, we have a dead fetus, and we have an ox that gored them. So no one knows. So each one is not a claim of a vadoyis. Each one is not a claim of an absolute. I know each one's a claim of a maybe, a shema. Avol bari ubari, loi amar. But our mishnahs of the bari, each one says, I found it, it's all mine. Sumchas never said his din in that case. Asks the Gemara 7 lines to the bottom. Rabbi Ravuna damar amar Sumchas. Afilu bari ubari ma'ikla meimar. Rabbi Ravuna explains that Sumchas holds his din even by hey bari. So what are you going to tell me? So again, the Mishnah is not like Sumchas. Responds the Gemara, if you look at Sumchas, I can still tell you the Mishnah is like Sumchas. Ki Amar Sumchas, when does Sumchas say his din? When does Sumchas say his din? When there's a drar d'ramaina, we'll say what that means in a second. So what is a drar d'ramaina? Rashi, 4 lines and the Amid speaks out. Sumchas says his din that you split it without a shvuah when someone is going to lose. There is a chesarain money. She'im yipara zeh shalaikadin. If this one pays unlawfully, he loses money. And if we say this one pater shalaikadin, then he loses money. And that's when Sumcha says there's no need for a shvuah. Says the Gemara. Now, just to point out very quickly, because we're out of time, Taisus famously over here on Jar D'Ramaina, Taisus says, what is Jar D'Ramaina? That without anyone opening up their mouth, there is a claim in Bezdin, which only happens in the case over there of the animal, because there's a suffix be'etzem, we could call it. But either way, let's just finish up. Says the Gemara, v'lav kal v'chaymer, 1 second. The exact opposite. Who? Over there, in the case of the cow, in the case of the fetus, each one is going to lose. As we turn over to Gimel and Aleph, and each one could say, it's entirely theirs, and yet, so what does Sumcha say? You split it without a shvuah. Whereas in our case, but in our case, no, there's no one that's gonna lose. Why? Because maybe they picked it up together. Lo kol shekain. Then certainly Sumcha should say you don't need a shvuah. So what's going on over here? Says the Gemara. Seemingly the Mishnah clearly is not like Sumchas. There should be no reason for a shvuah in our Mishnah. Finally responds the Gemara, and with this we conclude. Afilutema Sumchas. Shvuah zu midrabanan. According to Sumchas, it comes out the shvuah in our Mishnah is a din derabanan k'derav Yechanan damar Rav Yechanan. Shvuah zu takonas chachami shleyikolach chavel cholich v'tekim v'tachlis chaverai. We don't want everyone going to grab the garment of their friend. So the Rabbanan created a brand new rabbinical oath that has to be taken in such a scenario. But it's true. According to Sumchas, in actuality, the halacha should be, you should be achloika without a shvuah. But we could say that the reason why the shvuah in the Mishnah is Omer D'Rabbanan, so the Mishnah could even fit where Sumchas v'lish chaver v'omer shelihu. We'll pick it up from here, b'siyata dishmaya.